Good morning. It's Dr. Marcus Board here with No Capital. Let's talk about politics this week. Today, we are going to talk about Dave Chappelle, Kevin Hart, Chris Tucker going to Saudi Arabia to do comedy. We're going to talk about Paul Thomas Anderson's One Battle After Another and why some people who care about Black women are very upset about it. And we're going to talk about what's going on in the world today, specifically if the United States is telling us, hey, we got to stop all these domestic terrorists, sure sounds a lot like the Israeli government. Are we at risk of the same types of violence that they're perpetuating over there against Palestinians? Let's talk about that and more today. Dr. Marcus Board, let's get into it. So let's start with what matters. Another flotilla has been stopped, a series. I think there were about 50 of them. They were supposed to be protected by Spain. They were supposed to be protected by Greece. They were supposed to be protected by da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And end of story. People are getting on these boats. They're going over there, and tons of baby formula is being dropped into the water, 50 miles away from the coast from a people who are literally being starved. And the question we need to ask ourselves is, aren't the same excuses that they're using to genocide those people in Palestine, aren't those the same things that they say about us? Don't they say that we're unruly, that we're destroying the country, that we are terrorists? Aren't they saying now that we need to be stopped? Aren't they flooding our cities with troops? Aren't they preparing in some ways for this? Are we prepared to fight back? I don't know. I was just listening to something today saying, I'm tired of Black people being blamed for everything. And I get that. I could not be more, for that. At the same time, can nobody tell us anything? Can we talk to each other at least? At what point do we say, and then of course everybody loves to say, well, 92% of Black women. Okay. So first of all, 60% of Black people vote. So we're talking about around 20 million people who are voters. A little more than half of that are Black women. So probably like 11 or 12 million, 90% of that, right? So we're talking about 10, maybe 9 to 10 million people voting among the 40 million Black people in the country. So let's not, that's a full quarter of people. That's 9, 10 million people. That's plenty. And we don't have to make wide sweeping gestures about who is responsible for what. We're all responsible because we're all going to take this L. Now, the thing that all this reminds me of, I talked about it before, I'll talk about it again. The thing that this all reminds me of is how the civil rights movement really, really took off after Black people showed back up from World War II. Black people went there, they got training to be disciplined, to be focused. These are specifically Black men who, if for those who are arguing that they're the weakest link, fine, right? But specifically Black men went to war, came back, organized, mobilized, knowing how to focus on a mission and a goal, and then said, oh shit, we're being continually decimated. We still have not been integrated. And everybody who told us before we left, you a fool, you're going to go over there and get yourself killed, and you're going to come back and you're still going to be the same country, they were right. So that was the type of political shift that happened. We're not seeing that type of political shift today. I don't know that we know how to fight today the same way we did then. But at the same time, we just had a movement. We just had the movement for Black lives. Movements typically last around 10 years. And Trayvon Martin was killed in 2012. George Floyd is killed in 2020. That's about the gap right there. And so here we are, over 10 years later. And it's from the killing of Trayvon Martin, that is. And, movements don't just end naturally. I'm convinced about this. It takes about 10 years for the powers that be to shift the psyche away from these movements. And so we know that after civil rights, in some sense, civil rights lasted 30 years. But the mass movement phase was about 10 years. It's about 1955 to 1965. For the Montgomery bus boycott to Malcolm X's assassination. We could put it in that window if we want. The point is, in this window, we transformed America. We transformed society, and we did so in hopes that we could be free. That's the short version. We just wanted to be free. We wanted to be free to not get our asses beat and attacked and lynched left and right. Now here we are again. And we are in a situation where we don't have the same institutions. We don't have the same connections. We're not as tied together as a people. In fact, we are so global now, where integration, really, we didn't get too far. We weren't in an international world. Now we're really kind of spreading out. And so we live in this space where we're kind of we're kind of vulnerable. And we're seeing that, right? We saw ICE go in Chicago and run up in that building. Now, yes, were there Latinos in the building? Sure. But when that kid saw the police arresting the man, when the black person saw the police arresting another black person, and they yell out, y'all ain't supposed to be attacking us, you're supposed to be attacking Mexicans. Ha ha, funny, but he was dead ass. He was dead ass. We're not supposed to be the targets of this. And he's representing an idea that a lot of people think. One, that deportations are disproportionately affecting Latinos. It's not. It's actually affecting Black people, particularly Haitians. Two, the idea that people who are not domestic, people who are not from the United States, what happens to them will not affect us. And that's how we get to this question about what's happening in Palestine and how that's going to affect us. It's not clear. It is not clear in any way, shape, or form that these people have any type of interest in keeping us alive in this country. It's not clear. It is very unclear that if we don't start fighting for ourselves, that they won't just bring the fight to us. It is very unclear. And when I say fighting for ourselves, I'm not a dumbass. I'm not getting on the radio saying go and attack somebody. That would be stupid. So when I say fighting for ourselves, I mean showing up in civil disobedience. I do not mean peaceful. I mean nonviolent. There's a difference between peaceful and nonviolent, right? Peaceful means nobody gets bothered. Peaceful means nobody gets taken off of their square. Nobody gets made uncomfortable. I mean nonviolent to mean actually I can make people plenty uncomfortable. And so much so that there are things that I cannot say that I would absolutely encourage folks to do. But we don't need to get into that unless you're organized with me. Are you organized with me? Maybe. Guess we were the highest listened to show in August. Hopefully we did the same thing in September. We'll find out when we get the numbers. But for now, we're going to keep it rolling. So we're talking about nonviolence. We're talking about protest and resistance. We're talking about what needs to happen for change. And that takes me to Paul Thomas Anderson's One Battle After Another. People are giving rave reviews. I got good friends who love it. They're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. They were excited about just seeing an action comedy. They love the satire. They love that the characters were just true to themselves. They loved the way that the film went. I personally love the idea of seeing revolutionaries be the good guys. Right? So there's this thing in movies you may not know when characters are using iPhones in movies. iPhones are not allowed to be used by villains. Apple does not allow it. And at the end of this movie, no spoilers, one of the revolutionary characters, I think two of the revolutionary characters are using iPhones. I said, oh, that's interesting. Now, I can't give you a spoiler, but I'll just say it's unclear if it's because of the person who was using it or if it's because, like is somebody too big to be a villain? I don't know. But there's a big conversation. And I watched a movie with a friend of mine who identifies as a Black woman. And her and I had a really interesting reaction to the way that Tiana Taylor's character was being sexualized. So she is a sexy woman. She's a beautiful woman. And her character is this revolutionary. And we learn certain things about her, but we don't learn her perspective about race. We just don't. And yet it is thrown in our face. There are three interracial sexual dynamics in the film. One is Wood Harris's character, who we learn entirely too little about. He's with a white girl. And at one point he mentions go in there and, be a white woman. I thought insinuating that people trusted her, but maybe there was some race play in the relationship. And then Leonardo DiCaprio's character is with Tiana Taylor. That's his girl. That's Boo. That's Bae. Right? And so you might think, well, they're fellow revolutionaries. Maybe it's not about, it's not so much about what the racial dynamic is per se, but that's okay, there are two interracial relationships. Interesting. And then the movie hinges on Tiana Taylor having a sexual relationship with another white man. And so it's throwing it in our faces, right? And that white man has these weird, awkward interactions about, oh, I love Black women. And just being, fetishizing. And we're seeing it, right? But they never really, and this was my issue, and this is what I came to kind of realize, they never really deal with the question of Tiana Taylor's thinking about these racial dynamics. We hear from the white man. One loves her, one loves to have sex with her. We see her as this complicated figure making decisions that are really challenging. Another thing that I kind of, I don't want to ruin it for you. there are some questions about how revolutionaries are loyal or not. And I think that was a little bogus. But nonetheless, they were organized, they were strategic, the revolution continued. But yeah, they never really addressed her vision of sexuality. And then it made me start thinking, well, the other Black woman characters in the movie, they also didn't really get any depth. Right. So we see Regina Hall's character, who pound for pound is one of the greatest actors of my lifetime. She is brilliant. She's brilliant. She can do drama. She can do comedy. She can make me pay attention to somebody reading a dictionary. Regina Hall is outstanding in literally everything she does. And I every time I see her, I can't help but think about Taraji Henson. She was doing some, you know, movie that wasn't as revered or regarded, as we thought her caliber of actor. And she said, well, what type of offers do you think I'm getting? Do you think I'm getting offered to do movies? Yes, I was nominated for an Academy Award for Benjamin Button for a very small role. And yet, for basically playing Forrest Gump's mama. And at the same time, no, I don't get Sally Fields roles, right? I don't get the opportunities that everyone gets. And in fact, in Hollywood, they call the same 5 Black women every time they want to do a role. And they'll call me and they'll try to lowball me. And then they'll call Gabrielle Union. They'll try to lowball her. And then at some point, they call Vivica Fox and they try to lowball her or Jada Pinkett or whomever, right? And they call these same women and they don't get the roles. Viola Davis said the same thing. At my caliber of training and experience in terms of like awards and accolades, she said I should be getting the same type of opportunities as Sigourney Weaver, same type of opportunities, same pay. And she doesn't get it. She does not get that. And so there was this question about how do we reconcile the fact that these Black women are put in these roles, and I think this is the case for Regina Hall, where they don't get any depth. They don't get, it's not told from their perspective, right? The counter argument to whatever, all the things I'm saying is that Paul Thomas Anderson was telling the vision of revolution from the perspective of a white person. Maybe they just didn't know to ask the Black person, right? But I think that's a bit of a cop-out. He's a brilliant director. He's a genius director. He's done some amazing work. He has plenty of opportunity for plenty of folks to speak about where they're coming from, why they're doing what they're doing. Benicio del Toro's character is a good example of that. He literally is like, yeah, we got a little Latino Harry Tubman Underground Railroad situation going, right? He says it pretty plainly. He makes his decisions. He explains himself. Do I think his character got enough depth? No. Do I think this was about the white guys? Yeah. But at the same time, I think the failure, the introduction of these Black women characters into these narrow kind of tropish roles, right? I think Tiana Taylor was put in a position of a Jezebel, somebody who is just purely sexual, right? Yes, she has this revolutionary side. Yes, she has decision making that we don't understand. But the only thing we see her advocate for is wanting to have some sex. We see her pushing revolution, but we don't really hear her reasoning behind it. We hear her say, I want some dick. Then at the same time, we see Regina Hall. We don't hear her reasonings for wanting revolution, but we do see her carrying this motherly role. And we see her talking about it, how she's just stronger than everyone, this strong Black woman. But we don't hear what she thinks about it. Never. Then we see the main character played by another character played by Chase Infinity. She is a smartass. She's a liar. She does shit. And she's just kind of just fucking around, right? And so where Tiana Taylor is the Jezebel character, only focused on sex, hypersexualized, and Regina Hall's character is the mammy, not sexual at all, only there to support someone. Then Chase Infinity's character is the Sapphire, the smart mouth, the one who just gives buck, who isn't really about anything. And while I get that these characters end up getting some sense of purpose, all 3 of these Black women, there is something to be said about the fact that you're doing an entire movie about revolution. You are centering, in some sense, these Black woman characters, and then you're silencing them. You're not giving them an opportunity to just throw in a line somewhere and be like, hey, actually, I feel this way about this thing. Could have, boom, flip the script. But he didn't do it. And so I think he chose to put them in the center, and then he simultaneously chose not to give them a voice. And I think that's where the problem came in. And I think it's a mistake. It's a mistake that happens very often. And I think we can say that. I think we can say, oh yeah, I like the movie, I dislike the movie, that this choice was made and it was a mistake. And maybe that changed my mind, or maybe it didn't, right? But like, it doesn't necessarily say that it's not there. Now, we didn't spend all this damn time talking about this white man movie. Let's talk about a movie that did it well. And that movie came out this year. So every time people are like, this is movie of the year, Paul Thomas PTA, whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm like, damn, did we forget about Sinners that fast? A movie that did give some agency, that did give some voice, that did give a sense of expression to Black women. Did we forget about it that fast? Is that how quickly this thing turns? Is that we can't remember that this movie was a cinematic masterpiece that also, by the way, was a brilliant business move by the director, Ryan Coogler? Is it that easy to overlook Black genius from who that doesn't make the mistakes, that does do the work, that does put people out front? Is it that easy? And I'd say the answer is yes, but are we just going to let it happen? I struggle with that. I really struggle with this idea that it is okay to dismiss Black genius while also taking advantage of it. I struggle with that idea. And I'm not saying that Black genius deserves more respect or more care or more of our attention than everyday Black people. I actually think everyday Black people are genius. But what I think is when we have this well-recognized genius, I think maybe we need to bring it back to some sort of foundation to make sure that we are all taking care of each other. Before we talk about Dave Chappelle and Chris Tucker and Kevin Hart being in Saudi Arabia, I want to mention I was on stage last week with one Miss Stacey Abrams, who I told in private. I said, hey, I don't know if I ever got a chance to tell you this last time. We've met twice and we've went on 2 panels together. I think I did okay. Did okay enough on the first one to get the second one. We'll say that. But I told her, hey, I don't know if I mentioned this to you, but it meant so much to me that when you showed up at the verses for Gucci Mane and Jeezy, that they were acting up. It was acting up. And they stopped mid-stride and said, yeah, Miss Stacey, sorry, and showed that respect. I thought that was so important. That every hood rat got a heart of gold. Every hood rat I know got a heart of gold. Now it's some bad people out there, and it's some hood rats, and every hood rat I know got a mean streak too. But I really appreciated that. And she's like, oh, thanks, Well, so she was talking about her 10-step plan to combat authoritarianism. Now, Stacey Abrams and I have some differences in politics. She believes in the system a little bit more than I do. I'm a bit of an abolitionist. I think that the system should end. Lawyers, judges, police, prisons, jails, all that should be stopped. But that doesn't stop us from identifying the main problem, which is authoritarianism, right? That this world is on the way. We are on the way to the upper room. This society as we know it. And let me tell you, they're not going to go out before they take us out. They're going to take us out and then they're going to go out, right? So we got to pay attention to these things. But we're up there talking about needing to not only move ahead and do something and pick up the fight, but also to recognize that the stuff that we were doing before just didn't work, right? Trying to be Black excellence and capitalist doesn't work. Trying to do DEI as this very narrow, very surface level contribution and saying, well, we got some Black people in here now, doesn't work. We have to be fully put into the decision-making, the authority, all of the roles. We can't just be Black people who behave like white people. That doesn't work, right? And when I say behave like white people, I don't just mean any old honky-dunk white person. What I mean is behaving like white people is saying that you have to go in there and you have to deny any type of connection or affiliation with your Blackness, with the idea of being something different. You have to fit in. You have to assimilate. That's what I mean, right? We can't, it's not working. And I loved that she was willing to acknowledge that. She said, yeah, I want this thing and Marcus wants this thing, but we agree that we need to do something about this. Now, they set us up by not putting a tablecloth on that table. If you see the pictures, just know people commented on the socks. They thought the outfit looked good, but yeah, it looked a little crazy when I was sitting on that table. Go ahead and look it up. There wasn't a live stream. There wasn't a video. I got word from one of my students afterwards and said, hey, international students are scared right now. We are terrified. And we can't be going to all these events, but we want to participate. You need to stream this. And I said, you know what? You ain't lied. That's absolutely right. And so we'll figure out a way to stream it, to record it, to share it with folks in the future because it's really important. But I wanted to mention that because I know so many of our listeners are in Atlanta and how much Stacey Abrams meant to the people in Georgia. Almost the first Black woman governor in the history of the United States. Fun fact, I've said it before, I'll say it again. Only 3 black governors in the history of the United States. Deval Patrick, coming out of Massachusetts. Wes Moore in Maryland. And immediately wrong, I see Doug Wilder, who was the governor of Virginia from 1990 to 1994. And then David Patterson, who was the governor of New York. But that was after Elliot Spitzer resigned. I don't think that counts. So, nah, I'm going to still hold this one. But yeah, Wes Moore, Deval Patrick, and Doug Wilder. There's one PBS pinchback. Oh my goodness. Pinckney Benton Stewart Pitchback, an American publisher, politician, and Union Army officer who was the 24th governor of Louisiana from 1872 to 1873. The first African American governor in the United States. His recognition is disputed. Yeah. He don't count. It's been 3. I was right. Man, y'all be doubting me, and you wrong. Anyway, Stacey Abrams was going to be the third before Wes Moore was elected, but then of course had her election stolen. So we know what an election stealing looks like. It's not the big lie that they said on January 6th. But anyway, all right, let's get to the main event. The Riyadh Film Festival. I'm gonna just start you off by saying, you heard me say that we're not doing this thing where we are villainizing people for being from a different country, or we're upholding the United States on this pedestal. I was on a radio show with April Ryan one time, who's a big time reporter. I think White House correspondent for decades. I want to say, like, she's really important over at the Griot and doing amazing work. April Ryan, one time we were talking about Brittany Griner coming back home. And she was like, yeah, those gulags in Russia are terrible. And I said, what do you think prisons in America are? But okay, sis, you got it. Anyway, we're not doing that about any country. However, period. And at the same time, Saudi Arabia, we'll stop again. We're also not doing a thing where we're being Islamophobic, right? This idea of Islamophobia was a creation in our lifetimes. That thing was created in our lifetime. So let's think about what we can do and what we can create also in our lifetime. So anyway, Saudi Arabia is really messed up as a country. And I'm not just saying from some entitled American perspective that thinks that our cushy liberal values of free speech are so good and so great. No, I think the United States has all kinds of flaws, and the notions of free speech are all kinds of foul and limited. And the way that the rule of law works is completely devoid and defunct and just never actually existed, in my opinion. Like, I think the United States has all sorts of things. I could read this country down to the ground. And I don't think that a country where exorbitantly rich rulers dominating and killing people, putting people into what amounts to slavery, is something that ever needs to be supported anywhere in the world at any time. I think we can draw a line there. I think we can agree on that. I don't think they're doing it because they're Muslim. I don't think that has anything to do with it. I don't think it has anything to do with them being Arab. I don't think that has anything to do with it. I think they just believe that they can do it, and so people support it. And that's where we get the problem of what's going on in Saudi Arabia. Now there is a comedy fest going on right now as we speak called the Riyadh Comedy Festival. And the Riyadh Comedy Festival includes such voices as Kevin Hart, as Chris Tucker, and as Dave Chappelle. And I want to focus on Dave Chappelle. Why? Because I'm disappointed. He's the most successful of the three in a particular sense. I'm pretty sure Chris Tucker has made more money, maybe, than all of them. Chris Tucker is white famous, right? Chris Tucker was in Rush Hour. He got to the bag. Kevin Hart is probably more famous than the three of them, right? He is making money moves, right? He's making power moves. Kevin Hart is big. He is also white famous. I got white family, and I went to their house, and they said, "Have you heard this Kevin Hart? He is hilarious." That was some Trump voters right there. But no, I want to talk about Dave Chappelle because Dave Chappelle stood on business. In the early 2000s, for those who somehow have forgotten, and I just can't imagine you're listening if you have, but hey, maybe you'll hear my take on it and you'll feel differently about it. Dave Chappelle had what I believe is the funniest comedy show that has ever existed. Now, that is a high bar in a world where In Living Color existed, the originator, right? To me, In Living Color is like the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and I think that the Chappelle Show is the Michael Jordan of comedy shows. Yes, absolutely wanted to say LeBron James, but you know what? I'm not here to piss you off. I'm not here to piss you off. I don't care how you feel about it. I don't. It was transcendent. It was transformational. It hit on every cylinder, and then boom, right in his prime, he shuts it off after season 2. Why? Because he heard a joke and he got a laugh that he didn't like. And I paid so much attention to Dave Chappelle back then. Now, mind you, this is the early 2000s. We don't have Obama, right? This is Bush era, George W., right? This is around Hurricane Katrina. We are down bad. We're down bad. Dave Chappelle, who has a logo with the red, black, and green, the Pan-African flag that talks about our land, our people, our blood, right? He was with the shits. He had all kinds of deep, black, spiritually and soulfully and comedically committed bits in this show. He really had a critique of society. He talked about black people too, but he didn't do it in a way that hated black people. It wasn't like, in my estimation, the Boondocks, which I get the feeling that Aaron McGruder don't like some black people, and I didn't get that feeling from Dave Chappelle. So Dave Chappelle then is getting offered $50 million. Who do you think you're kidding at? Kelsey Clinton? Kelsey? Kelsey? Is it Chelsea or Kelsey? That's what Chris Tucker outtake in my impersonation from Rush Hour. $50 million. And he turned it down. And let me tell you, the world paid attention. He disappeared from the spotlight. He said he went to Africa to get his mind right. He did an amazing, brilliant interview with James Lipton on Inside the Actors Studio. And he said, maybe it's just a sick society. Maybe something about the society is sick. And wow, I was so proud of him. I was proud. I was inspired. I admired this man. I went to see Dave Chappelle on my 30th birthday. This is 10 years ago. I know exactly when it was. December 2015. And I was thrilled. This was, I was newlywed. But that, has ended in divorce, unfortunately, but, nothing but love for her. And she bought me probably the best gift that I could have gotten at the time, which is this Dave Chappelle ticket. It was amazing. She like got our friends together and did this great thing. And I was so excited. And we go in and we see the show. And then he does this. He says, "Hey, I used to tell this trans joke, but I got in a lot of trouble for it. And I wanted to talk to you all about it." This is before he went off the rails. And so he tells the trans joke, and then he tells about how he learned that, you know what, not exactly the best. And then, lo and behold, then the series comes out, and it's the version where he just goes all in on it. And I think maybe they just made a decision to put the bad one. I don't know. But then, of course, he picks up and he doubles down and he does this work. And it's tough. It's tough now to see this guy who stood up strong and said, "I'm going to take a principled stand," to now turn around and say, "I'm going to go to a place where free speech will get you murdered." Look up Jamal Khashoggi. That's how you pronounce it. Khalsoggi. Khashoggi. There's a documentary called The Dissident that talks about his life. He was chopped up into pieces. He was chopped up into little pieces by this government. That's who Dave Chappelle is going to see. I don't know how this guy's positioning himself among conservative right. Maybe he's the court jester, but I know that comedy used to mean something. It used to stand for something. It was the idea that we could speak truth to power, that we would be, especially our brilliant folks like Dave Chappelle, we would be responsible enough, we would be down enough to say something funny in the face of someone who is the butt of the joke. Rest in peace to the legacy and the honor that we used to share with Dave Chappelle. He is dead to me. Long live Dave Chappelle. That's all we got this week. Kevin Hart ain't even worth talking about. Whatever. He'll be all right. That's all we got this week. I'm Prof MBJ on Instagram. Check me out on Substack, on Spill, on Blue Sky, on TikTok. I don't know what we're going to be talking about next week, but I'll be here to talk about it. Dr. Marcus Board. Check me out. Check out some of the readings. Let's get into some of these politics. If you know me, you know I'm at Harvard this year, so a lot of this is coming from Boston. It's been pretty cool up here, to be honest. It's pretty diverse. A lot of Black people. And, folks are doing right by me. So that's all we got. Y'all take care. Tune in next week.